Another month, another recap. Definitely different vibes from September compared to August, where August presented with 2 absolutely banger projects and a bunch of other just pretty good stuff. September has been more consistent, without any actual 9 or 10 out of 10s, but a bunch of 8s for some of the most standout individual tracks of the year. I spent most of my month getting familiar with one artist in particular, and that turned out to be a great decision, although I'll talk more about them when we get there. But, as always, before we push on to the bangers, we got a hit with some individual tracks from albums which didn't fully work for me. Joba's debut album is out, and it's a sharp departure from the Brockhampton style, leaning into artsy piano rock. It doesn't fully work for me, but the tracks Lone Star and People Need People are excellent. The release of 5 Dice All 3s by Bright Eyes has been messy, to say the least, and I really hope Connor Oberst is doing okay. Bright Eyes is still a talented band though, with Bells and Whistles and Train Still Run on Time being absolute standouts. Future's new mixtape is definitely a mixtape made by Future in the year 2024. Listen to Teflon Don and Surfing a Tsunami. And Plutoski, because it's terrible and absolutely hilarious. I love my dude Tommy Richmond, and I respect not putting his hits on the album, but it probably needed them. Doesn't really hit until the last 2 tracks, but they are both stellar. And look, I love Wednesday as much as the next guy, but the new MJ Lenderman was disappointing, and no amount of vague country depression will save that. At least She's Leaving You is a positive from this project. Alright, now we can get started properly. Look at that dog. Look at it. Look at how fucking sick this cover art is. How are you not listening to this right goddamn now? Woof is the debut full-length album from new rave outfit Fat Dog, which came out at the same time as another new rave album by The Dare, which is a funny coincidence, since it's not like rave is a genre that's ripping up trees at the moment. The biggest difference between Woof and The Dare's album is that this is actually good. Fat Dog's tracks just have a real dance punk kick to them that propels them to another level. It's not the most complete album of all time. The biggest thing holding it back is how similar each track sounds to one another, and you can only hope that album 2 will account for that shortcoming. However, that's kind of made up for by the fact that Running is the best version of the one song they make, and they decided to put it last in the tracklist. Smart decision. Fun band. Good album.
Laughing at the fucking stars, and she says we're the lucky ones. And you know what?
I am super glad to see a surprisingly appreciative reaction from the crowd that gave this one a go, because I think Sarah Kinsley is very talented, and this is a really good debut. Ultimately, I don't know if she's fully established her sound yet. The best songs on Escaper, like Starling or Barrel of Love, feel like imitations of their influences, and every time I hear Starling I think of Lana Del Rey. But there's definitely worse artists to take inspiration from, and actually I think Kinsley ends up doing a really good job of combining these influences into a full-length project. Her biggest strength is undoubtedly her vocals, which are just gorgeous all the way through, and really carry the full strength of this project. Plus, some of the more upbeat tracks like Glint or Nights are great, and a really important change of pace. Overall, it's a very solid project, but also one that gets me way more excited for where Kinsley goes from here.
Hung up, I'm headed for your condemnation. Wait up, I'm headed for your complication.
Nilufer Yanya's last album still mostly hits for me, but ultimately didn't get me that invested in a follow-up. It's cool indie rock and all, but also pretty generic, and there are plenty of other albums that follow that same formula with bangers and ballads that are still more interesting. My Method Actor, on the other hand, is a successful attempt to establish her own sound, a moody, melancholic brand of indie rock that really hits the full project, and I think makes her a more original and interesting artist on the whole. It's cool to see her develop as a talented songwriter and a hypnotic vocalist, and overall it's just hard to dismiss anything that goes on in this album. One of the best atmospheres of any September release, for sure.
How can you say this is not worth debating? How can you say that you got no problem? How can we think when you're up and late?
Oh, I'm so full of whimsy right now, bro. Bro, you don't get it, bro. I want to dance in the rain and prance through city streets, my dude. And Ginger Root always had a certain charm to his music. You could see it in the string of EPs he released, even if those projects never fully connected with me. And ultimately, that charm really hits with Shin Megumi. It's a cute album. It's never not a good time. I'm not particularly familiar with the older city pop vibes it's clearly trying to emulate, so I can't say whether it's a good homage or not, but I think it's probably difficult to hear this and not be happy in some way. Shout out to the track Show 10 in particular. I don't even think it's the best here, but for someone who specializes in short and sweet cuteness, Ginger's ability to dive into a more expensive track and pull it off shouldn't be ignored. Ultimately, Shinben Gumi rules. Probably not the best of the year, or even best of the month, but definitely one of my highest recommendations from this video. Just great vibes all round, really. I've been waiting for this one, and it's a little disappointing. Don't get me wrong, it's still good. It's in this list after all, but I've liked Julie's output for a while now. Their 2021 EP, Pushing Daisies, is a release that I've come back to a surprising number of times, especially the opener, April's Bloom. They're a band with a lot of potential and a lot of talent, and it's a shame that their debut doesn't really live up to that. Still, it's a very solid shoegaze project with an engaging, depressing atmosphere. The final leg of the album is where it really picks up, with the highlights feminine adornments and piano instrumental. Spoiler alert, it is not just a piano instrumental. That is really where the band is at their best. They're great at bringing grunge and noise rock into their duo shoegaze sound. Ultimately, even if I'm not super thrilled with how my anti-aircraft friend turned out, it's a good enough project to keep me invested in where Julie as a band goes from here. The entire response I've seen from this project is something along the lines of, when did foxing stop being mid? This is my first foxing record, so I can't really comment on that, but man, they really pulled out all the stops for this one. The biggest appeal of the record is blatantly obvious immediately on first listen. This shit goes everywhere, but it's not in an uncontrolled, chaotic way. The first leg is full of hectic, abrasive noise rock, built to grab the listener with some classic shock value. But they don't rely on that gimmick, and further down the road use more intimately crafted song structures such as Looks Like Nothing and Hall of Frozen Heads, or straightforward indie rock bangers like Barking. As a self-titled, it's a great choice. Based on what I've heard about their other records, it's the most interesting and well-produced LP they've put out, and you can tell the effort behind the project is there. Maybe some of the slower balladry could have used some work, but overall this is one of the most interesting releases of the entire month, full of bangers that shouldn't be missed.
Until the drop stops.
Am I the only one that thinks the JME album covers should be switched? Not that I'm saying one is better than the other. Personally, I prefer In Waves to the debut In Color, but I'm pretty sure it's basically heresy for JME fans. Online discourse for this album seems to be surprisingly negative, and I'm not really sure why, because In Waves is a lot of fun. It's just a really danceable set of tunes. All I knew about Jamie XX was that one song is part of the XX that's like an Apple ad or something, so I wasn't expecting a ton from this, but with collaborations from Robin, Honey Dijon, and the Avalanches, he really pulled out all the stops to make this as impressive of a follow-up as possible. I mean, I hope it would live up to the hype after a decade of waiting. And even though my unpopular take is that it's actually better than his debut, I'm sure either way fans will be able to take something from this one. The new Juju record is a strange one, but it rewards multiple listens by being a massive grower. So I still haven't dived fully into Juju. I had their last album, Ignore Grief, and had a really good time with it. Mostly I think Jamie Stewart as a vocalist really suits that crushing, depressive ambient style, and as a songwriter, they were so good at eliciting dark imagery that it really complemented the overall sound. If you had told me they were going to go in a rock and noise pop direction for their next record, I would have had my doubts. And it's definitely hard to get into, especially when the opener is vastly different to and more boring than the rest of the record. But ultimately, Frank Beltrame is a super successful and creative set of tracks with impeccable production. Stewart's vocals still don't necessarily complement this overall sound, but that's not a bad thing. From what I've picked up so far, Juju are often intentionally unnerving, and frequently make this project feel like a hallucination so far from reality that it doesn't feel real. It's a really excellent rock project, and if you felt filtered by Juju before, you should still give it a listen, since despite what I've said, it's still relatively accessible and full of bangers.
It feels like I've been underground for this whole year, just waiting for the
When you perform specific unrelated actions at the same time, your brain will begin to associate the two with each other even if they don't really connect. During a period where I was obsessed with Mario Kart, I was also playing Damn by Kendrick a lot, and now I can't think about one without thinking of the other. I might be doing that to myself again because I spent most of this month playing Ace Attorney and listening to the entire Origami Angel discography. That doesn't really have anything to do with this album, but I thought it was cool. Anyway, Feeling Not Found is yet another W for the pop-punk outfit. I actually got into Origami Angel a few weeks ago, having no idea they were releasing a new album. I'd heard the title track a few times and decided to finally check them out. They're great, you should check them out too. Feeling Not Found is a bit of a separation from their previous work, more clearly influenced by post-hardcore and straying a bit from their emo roots, but I don't know, it still feels like their sound, and it's a necessary evolution for a band that had already kind of nailed what they'd done previously. I'm really glad that I've spent so much time with this group in the past few weeks. They're just so likeable, and they seem boundlessly fun and creative, really well written and energetic power pop that has left a massive impression on me. And that's it, another month done. I am working on my end of 2024 top 20 list. Hopefully it's out in a more timely manner than July of the year after. Don't know why I procrastinated so long. It's my favourite video I've ever made. Other than that, the pop music video should be out within the next week. I'm just putting some finishing touches on it. It's very much... It's structured because it's very repetitive, right, in terms of the formula that it takes, but overall, when you look at it, I think it's an interesting analysis of each individual big hit of the year and just to talk about how the pop charts are functioning. So look forward to that coming out. Other than that, I'm going to keep up with these album recaps. I enjoy doing a little monthly revisit of albums. And I'm looking at doing potentially another Modern Masterpieces episode sometime soon, and also talking about an anime soundtrack that, A, is really beloved, and B, that I think is really fantastic, and the story behind it is really cool. So hopefully sometime soon I start working on those. Other than that, thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.